As I told you on the phone, I keep on having this dream about her. Okay, well, she gets dragged, sucked into this machine. It's a kind of mincer. I try to pull her out, but I can't. She comes out the other end as a hamburger. The crowd scramble for it, and this one guy gets to it. He bites into the hamburger, and blood is pouring down his lips. I had the dream again last night. I woke up in a cold sweat because I wasn't able to rescue her from the mincer. And there she is, lying next to me on the pillow, looking like some kind of beautiful waif. The way I see it, at least if she's asleep, she's not washing her face. I counted the time she did that yesterday. 15 I made it. We got together at a time when her agent had gone and died, and she had absolutely no one she could turn to for protection. That was one of the things that first attracted me to her. Well, I knew from the outset that she was damaged. In many ways, she was like a child. Innocent, naive. Still is, in fact. She calls me Papa. Did you know that? Oh, half in jest, I know, but there's an element of truth in it. Even someone who wasn't an analyst would be able to interpret that, wouldn't they? And in many respects, I admit I am a kind of father figure to her. Not that she ever knew her real dad. He walked out on the family early on. She was thrown into an orphanage at the age of 4. But I'm not an orphan, she cried as they took her away. Her mother had been institutionalized on account of having paranoid schizophrenia. And on one occasion, had tried to smother her little daughter in her crib. Imagine living your life with that kind of knowledge. The only relative she says she had any real closeness with was an elderly aunt who died when she was 14. She tells a story of lying down in this aunt's grave before it was filled in. And what do you make of that? Wasn't that the weirdest thing? That's an image that stuck with me. My wife as a child, lying in a kind of fetal position, alive in an open grave. The first time we met, I was on a film set with Kazan, and he introduced me to her. She had some bit part in this movie. I remember she was wearing a black lace dress, and she had this white aura created by one of the studio lights. A bolt went through me when we shook hands. I saw her at a dinner party a few days after that. The way she walked into the room, sensational, in a red silk dress that was too tight. Well, the men were immediately smitten, and the women, well, you could almost smell the resentment in the air. She seemed ludicrously provocative. A strange bird in the aviary, I remember thinking. So I was immediately aware of her heightened sexuality, but there was something else. When I overheard someone at the party say, "They'll eat her alive," all I wanted to do was scoop her up in my hands and protect her like some injured baby sparrow. A few days later, she came with me and Kazan to the bookstore. She wanted to pick up a copy of Salesman and have me sign it, but as she was hunting through the place scripts, I noticed a guy in the next aisle who'd spotted her. He was jerking off inside his pants. She was wearing an ordinary blouse and skirt, nothing in the least provocative. Luckily, she hadn't seen the man, so I put my arm around her and quickly led her away to the poetry section, distracting her with some E. E. Cummings. When she came to say goodbye to me at the airport, I timidly kissed her on the cheek and knew for sure that I had to run back to my wife and kids in Brooklyn. I'd sensed the danger, you see. On the plane, I sat back and thanked my lucky stars I'd escaped. But then I caught the smell of her scent on my hand and wondered why the hell I'd left. She kept sending me these little notes. In her swirly handwriting, I have one. Here, see. Perhaps we can meet up next time I come east on business. Or I could just throw a few things in a bag and come anyway. What do you say? I think you know in your heart, like I do, that we'd be good for each other. I hate the whole Hollywood scene. You could rescue me from all this. Longing to see you again soon. M. Kiss. They were all like that. Affectionate, needy, urgent. I wrote back saying I couldn't give her what she wanted, but that I wished her well. I doubt she kept my replies. To prevent myself just jumping in the car and driving due east, I got myself an analyst then, too. What drew me back to her in the end? Christ, she stirred up such a fire in me. I felt more alive than I had ever felt in my entire life, and I was writing again. So in some ways it was sexual hunger, but it was also to do with being true to myself. Does that make sense? There was an inevitability about it too. Like some Greek tragedy we were destined to live out. Yes, that's right. It was about that time that I began intensively researching the Salem witch trials in order to write The Crucible. It was during this heavy period of work that she finally moved into my life. I'd put it off on account of trying to hang on to what was left of my marriage. Well, actually, I wanted to hang on to my children. But I was deeply, deeply involved with her. I used to visit her in her apartment high up in the Waldorf Tower. As I passed by the newsstands in the streets below, the papers were full of glamorous pictures of her, as well as articles slating me for my so-called subversive, un-American tendencies. It was a strange time. My wife-to-be had started sitting in on Lee Strasberg's classes. She idolized him and was sure that he could give her proper training as an actress. I didn't say as much, but in my opinion, she didn't need the method. She has a natural ability, and her only failure is being unable to recognize the huge talent she undoubtedly has. In my naivety, it never dawned on me how much publicity us being together would create, and that we would become public property. In order to avoid the photographers, we spent a lot of our time alone. And when we were high up in that apartment together, looking out on the world like two lovebirds cooped up in their nest, it seemed that nothing mattered but us. And now, you're the saddest creature I've ever met, I recall saying to her when she'd been telling me about her brutal foster father. You know what she replied? No one's ever said that to me before, she said, as if I were giving her a compliment. One day, to dodge the press, she went out of the service entrance. They were forever hanging around by the front door. She was in disguise. She had no makeup on, was wearing one of my sweaters. She had shades on and a bandana thing under her chin, as though she had toothache. But they spotted her and came tearing down the alley after her, finally cornering her by the garbage cans. And the next day, her picture was in the paper looking like some crazy old bag woman, surrounded by garbage. I hated that picture. Everyone said that we were the mismatched couple that would never last. One of the headlines at the time read, "The Egghead and the Hourglass." I had to content myself with the knowledge that I knew the sensitive, serious, intelligent soul that no one else was aware of because they couldn't be bothered to look beyond the beautiful, sexy exterior. It was important for us to realize that there was some substance to our relationship, that our love was considerably more than just a puff in the wind. We tried to hang on to that. After that, everything began to move very quickly. I was subpoenaed, my divorce came through, and my wife and I decided to get married. Do you mind if I get up and move around? Where was I? Oh, yes. My wife had been given this amazing opportunity to star in a movie with Larry Olivier, and I had the chance to turn View into a full-length script and stage it in London. So just a few weeks after we were married, we went to England together. We were given a tremendous reception by the public and the press, and she was incredibly uplifted by it all. Anyhow, Olivier had arranged for us to stay in this remote place in the countryside, which we were grateful for. But on the first night, as we lay in bed, weary from our journey, a huge choir turned up on the lawn to serenade us. That was a surreal experience, I can tell you. A host of English angels singing in the darkness. We tried to stifle our giggles and debated whether to go to the window and thank them, but knowing how reserved the English can be, and considering we were both stark naked at the time, it may not have been the most appropriate thing to do. She was convinced that Olivier had only got her in this film because of the publicity she would attract to the project. "I can't do it, Papa," she would say. "You can, baby, you can." She needed a hell of a lot of reassurance during the filming, and I was doing my best to give it to her, believe me, but at one point she began to distrust what I was saying, and nothing would convince her that she was making a success of the part. This movie was a light comedy, for God's sake, and she was using the Strasbourg approach. It finally dawned on me that all this friction was because she had no sense of self-worth and was absolutely sure that she would be abandoned again, like when she was a child. I had to prove to her that that wasn't going to happen. When I showed up on the set, her face lit up. I stayed till the end of the shoot and drove her home. In the car, I said to her, "Your performance is amazingly witty. You know that." "Is it really?" She seemed very unsure. "Yes, really." "Then why is Larry giving me such a hard time?" "Is he? Surely it's obvious that he sees me as a total disappointment." I was left with nothing to say. I expect you heard that she attended my hearing at the HUAC, so it wasn't all one-sided, the support. And that took some courage, laying her career on the line like that. Trouble was, although I valued her being there, I wasn't able to share my worries. I closed myself off, which filled her with fear, of course. I knew what I was doing. I was protecting a wound, turning myself inward. As soon as I admitted that to myself, I began to understand her a little better, I think. When we got back to the States after the film with Olivier, we both took a little time to recover. The bald fact was that Marilyn had become the most popular movie star in the world, and yet she was consumed with self-doubt and insecurity. I was worried that she was becoming too dependent on the pills to sleep, and as a result, I wasn't getting much in the way of sleep myself. When I did sleep, the nightmares began. Yes, As a matter of fact, that was about the time when the recurring dream about the hamburger first started. Anyhow, somehow, without the pressures of being on the film set, she gradually settled into a domestic routine. She decided to learn how to cook, and I used to come home and find great long lengths of noodles draped over the kitchen chairs. We both began to slow down and took to walking along the shore and chatting to the fishermen, although she hated seeing the rejected fish lying on the sand. One day she started to pick them up and throw them back into the ocean. "Don't let them die," she shouted like some mad thing. When she told me she was pregnant the other week, it shocked me to the core at first. I mean, I have 2 grown-up children from my first marriage, and I'm 45, for God's sake. But then she's never had a child of her own, and she loves children. I could see even the knowledge of her being pregnant filled her with a new confidence, a quietness of spirit. And it gave us both hope for the future, too. But it was all very fleeting. The doctor had warned us it might be an ectopic pregnancy, but she closed her ears to that. Still, it was just a matter of weeks before she was screaming in pain and being rushed to the hospital for the operation. "Don't take away my baby. I need my baby." As she lay on the hospital bed in a nondescript nightgown, pale and shattered, I found her vulnerability almost impossible to bear. "You'll leave me now," she said. "I'll never leave you," I said, taking her hand. "Everybody leaves," she said, turning her face to the wall. It was during the 3-hour ambulance ride back from the hospital, watching her lie there, sad beyond sad, that I had the idea. It's important to do something, isn't it? To take her mind away from her loss. Of course, I haven't yet told her what the doctor said to me in private, that she may never carry a baby to full term. But anyhow, I'm writing a screenplay for her. It's taken from a short story I once wrote, The Misfits. I'm creating a part especially for her, as a kind of present, if you like, something for her to get her teeth into, to prove to herself, if not to the whole world, once and for all, that she's one hell of an actress. I plan to take a year or more out of my life to write this. Oh yes, it's true, I know I've always looked down on screenwriting, but I'm making a sacrifice here because I believe sacrifice to be the essence of commitment, don't you? This will prove my devotion to her, my faith in her ability. When we were married, I took on the role of someone who would save her, and I haven't managed to do that, not yet. But absolute commitment can heal, I'm convinced of that. And I'm ready to give that absolute commitment to my wife. Christ, it's 4:30 already. I have to go and pick her up from her analyst. Don't want her wondering where the hell I am. Can't have her knowing I need some help too. Thank you. Thank you very much for listening. Yes, it's helped to put things in some kind of perspective. Same time next week, okay? I'll see you then.